Welcome to Dream, Declare, Deliver with Chris Carell and Candace Ogren. Join us each week as we explore how to live a life by design and turn inspiration into realization.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Dream, Declare, Deliver. I'm Chris Carell, and along with Candace Ogren, I'm the co-author of a book called Typhoon Honey, The Only Way Out is Through. Candace cannot be with us today. She is embroiled in a whole bunch of work stuff. And so I have the great honor and great pleasure of having my very dear friend, Amy Bladen, Dr. Amy Bladen Shatto, as my guest today. And we're going to be talking about the roles of our own behavioral style. What is our style? And, you know, in terms of when we're looking at creating a life by design, we need to know how to work with ourselves and what our needs and our desires are. And a lot of times those are based on kind of personality, but we use behavioral styles because it's so much easier to see what a person is doing and observe yourself and what you do, to get a sense of what your style is. And we have a very simplified little model that, we use, and we're going to jump into that and have a conversation about how that works and what happens when we get under stress and things like that. So I think the first thing for me is, holding a mirror up. How do I notice what I do more than anything else? For me, I count a lot on feedback from others, and they go like, oh, there you're going again. You're going for the results, going for the achievement, another bullet point on Chris's resume. And that tells me a little bit about what my style, my behavior style is. So why don't we start off, with, just talking about the four different big clusters of that. And, what's cool about having Amy on here is that she is a world-class expert in the field of behavior styles. She and I have done trainings, gazillions of them over the years, as associates, using this material. So, it's kind of our playground. Gazillions. So why don't you check gazillions? Yeah, right.
A couple.
Yeah.
So should we describe the four styles?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
So, there is, very high level, there's four quadrants that make up the four styles. So if you look at the four quadrants in terms of these
dynamics,
Dynamics. Yeah, I like
right.
that. You would think of how assertive am I, or how not assertive am I? And that would be one of the dynamics. And a better way to think of that is, am I more likely to ask questions? Am I more likely to tell and declare? To tell
people, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
And you can tell already which one I am. Leaning forward, leaning into it.
Right.
The other one is, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say the other one is, kind of a peoples versus things thing. Am I more oriented towards, being engaged with people and doing things with people, or am I more excited by the things, the constructs and the data and the results and things like that, So if you put those two against each other, they kind of map out four different boxes. One where I'm very people oriented and, and telling oriented, and one where I'm very people oriented, but asking oriented. One where I'm very data oriented and asking oriented, and one where I'm very, data or, specific results oriented and telling, oriented. And we have nicknames for each of them.
Right.
The real work came from, was it Wilson?
Wilson Learning, and
yeah.
I want to say it goes all the way back to the 70s, but there's been several different areas of research that have sort of gotten their own little takes on it. So the big ones that if you have heard of it, it would be like Traycom and Wilson Learning. These are the two that have sort of stolen the areas, but I don't think that's as important as what it is or what it stands for.
So we have nicknames for each of those four groups, for the person like myself who's just nutso about results, and very directive and telling oriented and things like that. We call them either drivers or, what's the other name we call them?
And
controllers.
Driver. Well, you're a driver, you're driving results, and I like to think of the controlling part as the result of that. You end up ends up being a side effect of being a driver.
Yeah, sort of. So people call drivers controllers, not because they like to take control of everything, but they take control of everything because they're nuts about getting the result. And, who can they count on more than anybody else? What? And so that's kind of the driver style or the controller style.
Yeah. So another one would be, and by the way, nobody has to be any one specific style. People always hear us talk and say, well, I don't think of myself as any one of these, and that's okay. You don't have to.
Actually, they're all human characteristics, and we have parts of those in all of us. Right. So there are times when I'm most of the time I default to, being more the take charge kind of person. But the other types are just as much a part of me. Well, one's not very much a part of me, Yeah,
I was going to say I have 3 of them as well. Speaking of which, so one of them is to be also very directive and telling, but also to be very people oriented, and we call that expressive. All right, that's one of the names of it. So telling,
promoters also. Yeah, right.
Promoter. And then again, that's sort of the outcome. You're a promoting personality. But then if you went all the way over to the other side, we've talked about the 2 that were most like ourselves. You notice. And because they were the directive types, and you typically find that people who are more like on a podcast or presenting in front of the room, it's not so surprising that they're going to be more typically associated with a presenting type of a role. But then if you go over to the other side in terms of being less assertive or being more, I don't want to call it introverted, but the asking types we can have. Go ahead, Chris, jump in.
Well, the people type askers are ones that want to make sure that they understand everybody else. So, they're very amiable. They're the kind of folks that, in fact, that's the name that was given to them originally, or they're very supportive of others, because their whole concern is knowing enough about the other people to be able to work with them, support them, help them, please them, and work with them in some way. So
I love that, Chris. People pleasers. That's how I look at them.
Yeah, and not always. They're not like doormats or anything like that kind of people pleasers. Their main thing in life is really to make sure that everything works in harmony, and how else do you do that but finding out from people what they need? Yeah. And then the other quadrant is, asking and data. And those are the investigators, the scientists, the analysts of the world. And in every system that I've ever looked at, that box is called analytical. Yeah. Right. And again, that's, one of those things that we all float into. There are times when you got to be very analytical.
Yeah. One of the interesting things, actually, I was just on a presentation on Friday where I was talking about these styles as you were. And one of the most interesting things that I find is not confusing this with a absolute personality. With Chris was just saying about we float in and out. It's because it's a style. And actually, Chris said to me before I went on that presentation is, how come I'm always different at home than I am at work? Because as being a style, I modify my style for how I am at work. So at work, I might be a lot more of an analyzer than I am at home, where I'm doing the rah, rah, rah with my family, or, getting the people, have to be the one that gets my family to be happy and sticking all together. But where we talk about personality, those traits tend to be very, very stable. They don't change. They're sort of formed by the time you're 20, 25 years old. But
so why this is important when we're looking at living a life by design is to know what your typical style is. When I'm doing a presentation, when I'm, my platform skill is standing in front of a group doing a training or something like that, I go right up into that promoter, expressive form. I'll tap dance, I'll sing, and I'll do whatever it takes to get them. to get them engaged and involved, because what I want to do, what promoters and expressives want to do is get people excited about the concept, so they'll tell a little bit, but they'll tell the exciting part so that you go like, oh, I want that too. Right. And so when I'm looking at my life by design, my two dominant skills are, promoting and my strongest is the controller or the driver, so how, what I try to do is I try to get people excited so that they can get the results that I want to get. So it's important for me to pay attention to those kinds of things. Now, if you look at that as a 4x4, a 2x2, a 4-box grid, right? 2x2. I'm sitting in one corner. The things that are touching me on either side, so I'm in the driver thing, the things that are touching me on either side tend to me, kind of my wingmen, and things that I'll fall back to, or I'll use as part of my pitch or part of what I'm trying to do. So I'll get analytical at times too. So I float back and forth between these two supportive wings of mine, that are part of how I do my driver, how I do my controller. Where are you on that? I forget. I think you're controller too, right?
I am, I'm pretty much equal parts controller, driver, analytical, and then a good parts expressive. But what I find when I'm under pressure, and that's the thing about what the research does show us about these, we go into a really different space when we get into I go much more into my driver space, like, we got to get this done. We got to get this done. We got to get this done.
You become a hyper driver,
hyper drive. And the thing is, when we can recognize doing these styles, which is very different than this is a preference. This is what we do. And the reason, and when we talk about design, what I always tell folks, we get to hold the mirror up to ourselves and say, okay, this is how I tend to show up, but how do I want to show up? How do I feel like I can affect other people in a way that is supportive to them, regardless of which of those boxes are? So if I tend to be drive, and I'm with other people, well, how can I maybe tone that down a little bit and go into one of the other boxes that I'm never going to get over to that supportive box. That's really diametrically opposed. But what box can I touch on a little bit more so that I can be more in the team? I can still use my skills of driver, but I can be more of a team player. That's why.
And I think that's a real. I'm glad you mentioned that, and that's really one of the things that more than I do on these quadrants, is what happens when we get under pressure. I had a friend call me up a couple weeks ago and said, "Chris, can you please coach me, please? She's got a new job, and under a lot of pressure." And she said, "I'm getting the same feedback that I've always gotten, which is I run over people."
Right.
It's like, sorry you were in the way, but I had to get this done. Right. So, so she was asking something that was based on, that quadrant, the driver quadrant. And, under pressure, we're going to go into hyperdrive. We're going to go into that. Now, the same thing is true in all the other quadrants.
All the quadrants have different pressures.
what happens when each of the other ones get pressured? Because that's great. That's the part that I love about, your analysis.
So the expressives, the rah-rah, happy, promoting people, they explode. When they get under pressure, they just explode and get very angry. And I said on one part that because what I used to find, a girlfriend of mine, we were both work colleagues, and we would both get very, very upset. And I think at that point in my career, I was more promoter than I was driver, but we would get furious and explode at each other. And then 2 seconds later say, hey, do you want to go get ice cream? Slam the door and then go get ice cream. And that's a great example of what expressives do. But what's not great is that we were both the same type, so we got each other. But when there's somebody of a different type, that is not acceptable. And when you're in a team of all different types, people don't get that. So let's go over to our amiable type. Now, this is somebody who is more of an asker and somebody who is very supportive. So they ask questions and they're very people oriented. So they're very supportive. You're going to find them in more of an altruistic type of a soft personality.
Yeah. And they also observe too, so they're not the first to speak. They're not,
right.
Their questions come afterwards.
Under pressure, they do the exact, whereas a expressive explodes, the person who's an amiable hides.
Yeah.
They just literally go into a shell and you don't see them again. And the analytical who's down there, they're just whatever, go along.
Yeah.
Fine.
Well, and it's kind of like if you don't understand the details in this, there's no use in my talking to you.
Fine. Whatever. Passive, aggressive. So
right.
You got the one who's exploding. The driver is, I already kind of paid.
You're running over people.
And you got the analytical who's, fine, whatever. Yes. And then you got the poor amiable who's like hiding in a corner. So under pressure, look what's happening to your team. Yeah. The great news is that these are all things when you hold up the mirror and you know what your tendency is, you can say, I know what I'm doing. And you can also know what the other person, when you see someone's going into a corner, you can think, well, that person's an amiable. What can I do to bring them back out?
Right.
That's the beauty about design.
Right. And so if we look at these 4 different boxes of behaviors that people go into, and you can kind of pick your own and say, well, I'm mostly like this, like I'm retired now. And so I am, and I want to go on, travel, and I want to see the world and see the places. I've seen so many things in my life as a consultant, but there's so many more on the bucket list. And so I have to switch into my promoter, my expressive, to get my wife, Sarah, on board with the next adventure, because she's still working. She runs a pretty large business and so she can't get away for more than about 2 weeks. So I have to engineer these things and come up with ideas that will fit into her plan and then get her excited about that so that we can, go off together, because she's my favorite travel partner. I'd rather be with her than anybody else when we go on a trip, because we do the opposite thing. So here's something about design. I'm married to my opposite corner, and so, what's really great about Sarah is that she's very detail oriented, very people oriented. She has the ability to draw people out of their shells because she asks so many questions. When I was a consultant and traveling all over the place, I'd come home and I'd say, "Oh, Sarah, I met a new person on the plane today," and I'd tell her all the things that I ask. I call them Sarah questions. I ask all the Sarah questions, and after I told her about this new person I met, and she'd say, "Well, does she have any kids?" Or she'd ask the one question that I didn't ask. That's what's powerful about that amiable style is that they always are asking more information about you. They want to know all that stuff. When we go traveling, My results oriented and my big picture orientation sees the lay of the land. Sarah's detail orientation and her questioning and people orientation, she gets all the details of where, where's the best place to go to eat? Because we always go native, so just in mapping out that part of my life by design, knowing our two styles, allows us to go to places that fit both of us in a way that we're both, on vacation and getting fueled up in the ways that we love to get fueled up. So that's kind of why we're, why we want to go down this road and talk about, our styles, because it helps us then in our design, phase of dream, declare, deliver. You got to design what it is that you want to dream about and what you want to deliver on. So, what you and Bart have the same style, or do you have different styles? What do you think? I was
just thinking about that. So, my husband's an actor and heavy feeler. So if we look from the Myers-Briggs perspective, which I know we're not, but I think we have several things in common, but he's got to be an expressive, but maybe not. Maybe he leaves that on the...
That's his job.
You know what? Yeah, he's probably analytical because he's always asking on the outside. I guess he would be a deep analytical and deep inside. And then I just never think of him like that because he's Bart.
I always think of him. I always think of him as expressive and amiable.
Yeah, but you know him really well when he's very amiable. He gets along with, but he's
everybody.
Deeply analytical. Deeply.
Well,
analytical.
Yeah, when he goes into a role, as an actor, he really digs deeply into that role. And does the history research on it and things like that.
He's everything but a driver. He is the other three. Right. And I he's all three. And he does not have any of the driver. I have all of the driver.
Yeah. So when you guys are working together or trying to have a vacation or things like that, who does the planning?
Me.
Okay. Right. And how do you make sure that, you're satisfying what Bart needs to do when he does that?
We communicate very well, and I think we know that we're different. And I think that's the beauty of these styles. We know very, very well that we have different desires and loves, and we're very, very astute at saying, well, I know I want this, but I also know that you probably don't. So help me understand what is your thing. And using the styles, I will say to him, I know you need something that fits this and this and this. I know you need something to unwind while I need something to, and that's a good example. Like you're going to need something to,
decompress with.
It's actually the opposite. I'll want to go to the beach and lay there and do nothing because I'm such a driver. And his idea is run, let's climb, let's hike. And so we'll find that thing that, we both get the thing that we need. That's the
so
opposite.
I have a visual that, so Amy and Bart went on a vacation. They were on a safari, and they come back and they show this video of, Bart's an actor and a singer, and he gets into the village and he has all the children in the village singing. And it's just such a beautiful scene.
Yeah, they sang the national anthem of Tanzania, and we sang the national anthem of America. It was phenomenal.
It was really sweet, But that's that amiable, just being able to pull the kids out and getting them singing together. It was really neat.
And that was exactly what he just got all the little kids standing around him, and it was like there wasn't a dry eye. That's how he thinks. He's like, how can I make these little kids like really happy? It was so cute.
Right. So how would you, as you look at a future, and I told you I wouldn't interview you, but this is a question, from my best friend. As you're planning out your future, how do behavior styles play into what you need and want in your design?
That's a great question, because I am such, this is where, I guess the driver
Bingo.
really is my personality, because
Right.
I'm always thinking of driver, and there's a money component to that. For
Right.
me, it's always been money is success. And I think this is the best question you could ask me, because very recently, I think, as you know, I've started, my own consulting business because I've wanted more balance in my life between the other things, and not just driving for the end result, but having the balance between my promoting and amiable, and not just amiable, the altruistic side of me that's hiding in there that I haven't allowed out, and the expressive side that I want to, and the analytic, all of the things that I have let get unbalanced, because all I've done is drive for somebody else in a corporate America. So I think as I'm designing my future, I am balancing my 4 styles very purposefully, which I have not allowed myself to do, because I've been very stuck in, I have to drive because
I have to deliver. Yeah.
I have to and there hasn't been a for what. Yeah. So now there's a
why.
For what's and a for why.
Yeah.
So that's I love the question that you just asked, because right now is the time that I'm doing it.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I ask is, having retired, I wanted to put my driver on hold and kind of get into the other parts of me. Yeah. And my career in retirement is I've become a writer. I've decided that I'm a writer, and I've been writing books, Typhoon Honey being one of them. I have a new release coming out this year called Learning to Feel. And how do I do that expressive style of me? I drive it. And so what I've been reflecting on is, how can I be more, and you asked me this question when I was writing Learning to Feel. You said, have you ever tried free writing? Just let it flow out of you, instead of like having the outline and, like 200 words a day, having the discipline. I get up in the morning, I get my coffee, I sit down and I write, and I do that, as a discipline, because I'm a driver. That's who I am. And so what I've been looking at more recently is, how do I balance that out and take the, it's not pressure. I don't feel pressured by my own goal to complete a book, but I do still approach things from that results oriented, driver oriented. I'm working with another friend on a book, and, Word has this wonderful thing that it counts all the words that you've written. And we just hit 100,000 words in this book.
Congratulations.
But the thing is, I keep on saying to him, oh, we're at 70,000. Oh, we're at 90,000 or whatever. And he goes like, why are you telling me that?
So what?
Yeah. So what? Yeah. Well, to me, that's a score. That's kind of monitoring, like money is a scorecard for you. Right. Words are my scorecard when I'm writing. I feel like I've accomplished something. It's like a bricklayer goes out to work on a wall. I envy them, because at the end of the day, they look at that wall and there's 10 more rows that they had that they didn't have in the morning. And as psychologists, we don't have those kind of results, those observable results. We work with people and soft things. And so maybe we get a thank you every once in a while, or maybe we see the results that our clients are piling up. But, it's really, keeping our own score, as some part of the design is something that's always in my head. And what I've been thinking of, recently is, how do I relax that part of me? Just like open up my clenched fist and let it be, and just be in the research for the book, be in the expression of the book, and be in kind of the amiable, supportive part of writing the book, where I'm asking people, tell me your story. I want to know your story.
Well, that's just it.
Yeah.
And you just skipped over, I think, forgive me, but when you said, oh, well, sometimes it's the clients. See, for me, that is, as a psychologist, it doesn't matter what we're doing with our clients. So if you're coaching someone, say it's career, you're coaching someone on finding their next thing. If that client, after 6 months of coaching, finds their next thing and they suddenly go into that and they call you up and say, I did it.
Oh my God, I did it. Yeah, right. Isn't that great?
And it's not you did it for them. It's you coached them so that they could, that's the the goal.
And their results are our results. I mean, that's how we monitor. That's
the number. That's different than, counting. Bart can count how many butts are in seats at a show that he puts on.
Right.
Well, so what if they all walk out saying that was the worst show I ever saw in my entire life?
Right. They never do that at his shows, I'm sure. But I'm just saying we're making up. I loved your example, but we make up numbers that just don't matter. I mean, so what? I'm getting results for a big, huge company that I don't, at the end of the day, I have to look back really hard to even think if I cared what those companies were doing. Some I did. I really did. But it's not as meaningful as when I am looking eye to eye to a client and I can say, I really care if that client succeeds. Yeah. And so back to life by design kind of thing, what I really want to do in my life, in this iteration of my life, is to live a more balanced life. To have all of those things in balance, like what you were talking about, and knowing where I tend to be and observing myself where I keep defaulting into, like even writing the book a to-do list, instead of enjoying the process of writing it. It's something for me to pay attention to, so that I am more conscious about my designed life, and I'm able to do that. I just took a vacation with my brother to work on the book. He's the other person I'm working with on the book, and we went to South America, sat on the beach, but we had two-hour segments each day where we worked on the book. We were very, very driven, very results oriented. We did our 2 hours this morning. Now we can play and go swimming and things like that. And then we'll have another session in the afternoon, and then we can go play and go swimming or go out to dinner or whatever. But I think we're both from German stock, and that results oriented, task oriented, hardworking stock that we come from, is still part of our way of being, and what we do. So we need to wrap this up. Do you have how would you advise people to use the behavioral styles model to help them plan their future and help them design a life worth living?
Oh, that's a great question. Number one, figure out where you sit. Number one, hold the mirror up and say, is this where I want to be? And then say, if it is, great. So how do I model my life around staying there? If it's not, or if there's some part of it that you want to alter, say, where do I want to be? And how do I, move up and down? Or in what circumstances do I move myself up and down? Because sometimes it's a tendency that you're going to move that style based on what the circumstance is.
And you almost have to practice it.
Yeah.
So like if I wanted to be more of the amiable, supportive style, how would I practice that? What would you recommend that I do to build that muscle and that behavior style?
I think, think about it from a logic. I think there's a lot of practice you could do. It's asking more questions and getting the people side into your questions. And so logically, literally, when you start feeling like you're going down the path of driving, or, getting too outside of yourself, back off and say, what questions should I be asking? And am I including the people side of it and just moving? It's literally catching yourself.
Yeah.
And maybe, I mean, if we were doing a workshop here, we would have little cheat sheets saying, here's some people-y asking questions.
Right.
Here's some people-y, telling questions, but write yourself a little cheat sheet. There's nothing wrong with that. So think about it. What asking people questions, what telling people questions, what asking task or analytical questions, and what telling driving questions. I don't know if that's too formulaic. I mean,
no, but I think I agree, and I think there's also ways that we can practice. The ways to practice being a driver is really to find metrics, find things that will help you know what you have achieved. It's nice to have a goal, but if you're not measuring it, you're not paying attention to that. So people who aren't drivers, one of the things that they can practice is setting goals and with metrics in them, with a start date, a check-in date, an end date, and a result. And a lot of times it's even important to have somebody else judge your results for you, because if you're not a driver, having that other outside opinion to say, well, yeah, nice idea, but I don't think you got all the way there, or wow, you blew it out of the park.
Well, even if you are a driver, it's always good to have that objective
exactly.
opinion.
So, and if you're a promoter or an expressive type person, or I mean, you're not that, but you want to get more of that, that fun party side to you in there. Some of the things that you can do is to find out what excites other people, what turns them on. If you look at, there's an analytical part of me. When I post something on LinkedIn, I'll post, 3 different topics, but I'll change the color of the banner picture. Some I'll make very bright colors. Some I'll have in a, kind of black and white. And then, there's a part of LinkedIn that you can actually monitor your results. How many clicks did you get? And I noticed that in doing that the bright colored pictured ones always get more clicks than the plain ones. So I always now have a picture that goes with it that's very pretty. Those kinds of things. That's an analytic looking at a promoter kind of thing, or at an expressive kind of thing. What's going to get other people excited?
That's
so
really interesting, Chris.
What are some of the things that you could do to, for me, my hardest quadrant to practice is the amiable, and supportive kind of role.
Oh, ask yourself, what's the mission behind this? I don't want to do this without why would I do this? Who would I be helping?
Yeah. Where's the heart in it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And getting into what you were calling that what or why, the behind it. Absolutely. So when you're asking those kinds of questions of yourself, you're practicing what that amiable, supportive kind of person is doing.
Who else? What would somebody else think? Put yourself in somebody else's shoes. When I do this, what impact does it have on somebody else? Because so often we're so caught up in, I got to get this result. Take off the blinders and think, when I do this, it has this effect on Chris. Yeah. Or this has this effect on my husband.
Right. My brother and I were talking about massage when, in one of our casual conversations, and we both do the same thing. I close my eyes when I'm giving a massage, giving, a back rub or something like that for Sarah. And the reason I do that is so that I can try to feel what her skin feels. So I try to imagine the reception of what I'm doing. Am I pressing too hard? Am I really getting at that knot and it hurts, or that's really relieving it? And, so I'm focused much more. If I have my eyes open, I'm focused on my hands. But if I have my eyes closed, I'm focused on what does that muscle feel like inside her when I'm working with that. And Bruce, my brother, does the same thing, is, really when you and I talk to execs, we always talk about listening to the listener.
That's a good one.
When we're speaking, are we speaking in such a way that we're spewing words out of our mouth and, well, I said my thing, and if you didn't get it, so what? Or are we saying it in such a way that we're watching people's eyes and eyebrows and noticing, hey, that didn't land too well. Tell me what didn't make sense. And, in that way, we're listening to the person that's listening to us. And those are practices that are amiable, supportive kinds of practices. Nobody wants to learn how to be an analytic, though, do they?
I think they do. I think artists. I think artists, the whole world of artists wants to learn how to.
Right. Yeah,
wants to be more left brain.
Exactly.
And I've worked really hard with my husband, who's actually become very good at it. But they don't normally think in spreadsheets and numbers, and you can show them how to. Here's how you bring the numbers together in an organized format, and it's amazing. It's a matter of using tools that a lot of people who don't naturally think analytically, sometimes showing them the tools themselves are just not something that eye-opening right brainers use.
Right. Yeah. Right. So to wrap us all up, there are 4 behavior styles. There are gazillions of behavioral styles. I use that number a lot, but there are lots of different styles. We just have these 4 buckets that we're talking about, and ways that you can understand yourself, and then ways that you can practice those other styles. And finally, in terms of crafting that life by design, looking at where do I want to build more of, balance more out, and pay attention to fueling yourself by getting the kinds of things that you want and desire in your life. And that's a good place for us to end. So we'll see you all next time on Dream, Declare, Deliver. Amy, thank you so much for joining me today. It's just always fun to chat with you. You're more like my sister than a colleague. So,
thank you for having me.
Yep.